So let's now, anyway, by the way, for any of you who had that First Amendment question that was asked before the break, just note that if you go to my faculty website at theolaw.org, the one you already have that address, I've got a entire 3-day course that Dr. Waller and I did on Christianity in the Public Square. I did half the lectures, he did the other half, but bottom line is that I've got lectures on that whole process, the constitutional part, the theological part, and they're videotaped like the ones here, and all the links are there, and you can watch them for free. Pretty much take the entire course for free. And I've got the downloads and handouts on there as well, if those you want a more expanded view. And those you have nothing better to do but to keep Amazon.com in business. I've got a bibliography too, and the textbooks for the course for those of you that want to buy those and read along with that. So, all right. So now, okay, we looked at, technically the end of the deficient views handout deals with atheism and skepticism. That just simply, at some point, I just have to take certain things out. And since in our program, technically in philosophy of religion, you're dealing with Dr. Smith's class, you're dealing with atheism and some of these other issues. That's where there's overlap, so I tend not to, just won't cover that as a topic. But if you're going to do a complete deficient views section in theology, you'd include atheism and skepticism and those other types of areas. Also, for a probably best book on this, Norm Geisler's book on Christian apologetics. It's an excellent resource for the defective views because he, about the first third to half of the book, deals with all of these as worldviews or defective views of God. And again, it's just well done, it's concise, it's well argued. And so if you have to have a resource on that, I'd say that'd probably be the one to buy. Plus the rest of his apologetics book is good too, but it's particularly good in that area. So, not everybody addresses this area of defective views. So, all right, that said, get out your Theology Proper Part 2 handout. And now we move forward to, here's where, when you're dealing with basically what's going to distinguish you between a layman and a professional in this area, this next kind of stuff we're going to cover is really sort of where the rubber meets the road. You have to be able to make the fine distinctions and be able to ramp it up a little bit. So now you're going to get a set of tools to help you make more univocal, fine, proper distinctions so you can clarify the ideas better. So this is why now what we're moving into with respect to the doctrine of God is distinctions and definitions. And all these distinctions and definitions you'll be using throughout all categories of theology from now on. For example, look here on page 1 of the Theology Proper Part 2 handout, and note that the areas where these distinctions apply. For example, how do you distinguish the persons of the Trinity? This is where most people trip up. Most people only have one way of distinguishing something, and then it's a real or essential distinction. If you're distinguishing one thing from another, you're saying they're two independent things. So if that's all you got, then you've got three gods and you've got three independent beings and things like that. But there's multiple ways to make distinctions. I've only listed 5 of them on the page, but these are the 5 most common ways of distinguishing in philosophy of religion and theology. So that's the person to the Trinity, but see, for someone that's only got that one distinction, they get to that and say, it doesn't make sense to me. So literally when I'm dealing with people on this subject is first I want to teach them distinctions, and then they realize there's more than one way to distinguish something. Then all of a sudden, it necessarily follows that you've got 3 gods is gone, because if all they have is that real or essential distinction, it will necessarily follow that 3 equals 3 beings, or 3 substances. So that's why you can really get a lot of mileage out of learning to think better, and even teaching your opponents how to think better, because you're taking away a good number of their objections. So, for example, I already mentioned this. How can 3 be 1? We'll look at number 2, essence and attributes. How can 30 be 1? Okay? That's another way of distinguishing. But we still have to distinguish the divine attributes, and yet God is still one God. Okay? Third there, how do you distinguish between soul and spirit? Okay? Classically in Christian theology, our debate between whether the constitution of man is 2 substances or 3 substances, but it really comes down to, do you think soul and spirit are 1 substance, or are they 2 distinct substances? Okay? And again, Christians disagree on that, but it's how are you distinguishing these things? And then a couple other things. How do you distinguish intellect, will, and emotions from your soul itself? So these are the kinds of things where if you don't have the proper distinctions in place, you're simply going to make errors that are things that end up not making sense or fitting in the system. So that's why it's good to do, we start out with this. So after that, we're going to look at basic metaphysical language, which frankly, you can take several whole semesters, read thousands of pages on that, and I'll talk about that when we get to it. But the main thing is that at some point to talk about souls, the triunity of God, the fact that Christ is a God-man, you've got to bring in this clarifying language that helps us understand how God is 3 in 1, how Christ is God and man. Because otherwise you can conflate the ideas, it sounds contradictory. But remember, all this stuff comes from, we got the biblical data, now this is the result of 2,000 years of reflection. I just get the benefit of having to read all those guys. I'm not telling you anything new. This is stuff that, people have thought long and hard about and, developed by reflecting on the data. And so it's up to our job at this point just to understand it and pass it on to be able to explain the faith well. So on that, let's start moving forward and look at the types of distinctions. So distinction 1, the real or essential distinction. As I say, it's probably the way most people by default distinguish things unless you know better. And thing about this is just definition, distinction between 2 independent things, that is 2 distinct essences, or more precisely 2 substances. These are separately existing things that exist in reality, okay? Now, thing is that when we think about this, you have 2 apples, 2 oranges, an apple and an orange, or even your body, even though it seems to be one thing, the fact is it's made up of, billion little single things that make it's really a composite thing. It's a bunch of little independent things that come together and make a composite thing. And you can really or essentially distinguish one atom from the next atom, one molecule from the next molecule, okay? So in that sense, you have compositeness, complexity, and all of that in the type of substance that we have as just having a physical body. Now, we conceive of God, the persons of the Trinity, having this kind of distinction. What are you going to have? You're going to have 3 gods, okay? So, or that the soul and the spirit are really or essentially distinguished. Well, they'd have to be 2 separate non-physical substances, okay? Or the intellect, will, and the emotions, are those separate? So that's where we conceive of that. If all you have is real or essential distinction, you're going to make some errors in your theology. And frankly, if you get to the anti-Trinitarians, by and large, I haven't met one yet that understands distinctions. And that's why they default to there must be 3 gods. And then that's why taking him through this stuff, you go to the next layer and the next layer. See, you're taking away their basic arguments, which is if there are 3 persons, it necessarily follows there are 3 gods. And the key part there is it necessarily follows, okay? Because for them, if there's only one way to distinguish, then 3 persons means 3 distinct independently existing substances, okay? And literally, this is the stuff that's been killing us for 2,000 years because people won't distinguish properly. And they jump, let's say, jump to contusions, right, get their headache. I think it necessarily follows you have this when it's like, no, just not the case. There's lots of other ways to distinguish things. So that's why this is going to be a helpful tool for you when you master it. So then, that's easy enough. That's where most people are at. Now you move to the next phase. Now that you're not distinguishing between different independent things, now we're moving to distinguishing within a single thing. Okay? And so now you've got more than one kind of distinction. Well, how do you take a single thing and acknowledge distinction within a single thing? And read the section here on formal distinction. Right? Now here, we're going to say the thing that exists in the mind-independent reality may be a single thing, but within that single thing, in the mind, the ways of conceiving one and the same thing. You know, distinctions can be logical, grammatical, all sorts of things. There's, you know, this single thing, but I can distinguish X and Y within the single thing. Example, look at number 5 on the bottom of the page. It says, within a red ball, the mind distinguishes the formal objects of redness, color, shape, sphericity, but it's still one red ball. Okay, it's not. It's that's part of it. Okay, or 2, within the human soul or spirit, the mind distinguishes the formal powers or capacities of intellect, will, and emotions, which are not separate things from the soul or spirit. But they're distinguished within the soul or spirit. The intellect's not the will is not the emotions, and so forth. So again, that will give you, here's a form of something, and even when you get to intellect, will, and emotions, you could either, one sense you can make the case those would be modally distinguished, but I want to save that for later. But think of the red ball and distinguish in redness from sphericity. Still one red ball, yet within this, let's say a formal distinction with a foundation in a thing. That means I can have a genuine intramental distinction grounded in an extra-mental reality within a single thing, okay? And that's the formal distinction, okay? Now, and that's where, now we move on to where the rubber meets the road for us. Now, for Trinitarianism, right, and other types of things that exist, there's something that has a close conceptual overlap to a formal distinction in the sense that you can have, you're considering a single thing, but instead of conceiving, conceptions or distinctions within the thing, you're conceiving how the entire thing exists in a particular way, not identifying a particular property or attribute of the thing to focus mentally or logically or grammatically on. So, and this is where we get to the modal distinction, which distinguishes the various modes of existing or modes of subsisting of an entire thing, okay? And so the example I gave, 3 modes of water, and point is, look, you get a single H2O molecule, okay? And that, there's 2 parts hydrogen, 1 part oxygen. Boom, that's an H2O molecule, okay? Now, ice isn't H2OI or something, okay? It's just, there's no new thing that's added to it. But to distinguish, let's just say we have 3 distinct H2O molecules, okay? They're all H2O, that's its essence, okay? It's H2O, period. It's a water molecule. But we can distinguish the mode, and when you see the word mode, you can substitute way, manner, or in some senses, state of being. So again, the word mode throws people off. And there's a distinction, by the way, between the modalism heresy, which we'll talk about, and talking about a mode of existing or subsisting. So So here, if you have, ice or a solid, liquid water or steam or gaseous form, well, it's an H2O molecule, but we're distinguishing what? Its mode. Here's H2O existing in a particular state of, the entire molecule exists in a particular way, okay? So each of these can be distinguished as the entire substance is existing in a particular way, okay? And the problem with this kind of an illustration for the Trinity is arguably the same molecule can't be ice, liquid water, and steam simultaneously, not the entire thing, because it's dependent on its heat. So that phase, that mode, that state of being, whatever it happens to be, that's where we're at there. But it is a beautiful example of a modal distinction, okay, and how to understand the way an entire substance can exist in three different ways. But it can exist in three different ways simultaneously. You're either going to have to do this, let's say you've got the genus or species H2O, okay? Well, here's ice, liquid water, steam. We can have three molecules, each numerically distinct instances of that substance, each in a distinct mode. But see, what's that an example of? Tritheism, okay? Or you've got the same molecule in mind that starts out as ice, but then when you heat it up, it ceases to be in that mode and then becomes liquid water. You heat it some more, it ceases to be in that mode and becomes this. So it's a progressive modalism where there's progressive states of existence or modes of existence. See, that's the modalistic heresy, at least the most popular form of it. So, see, God is one person, but then he's putting on different masks at different points in history. In the Old Testament, he's Father. New Testament, he's Son. Post-Pentecost, he's Holy Spirit. So God has three costumes, okay, that he wears at different times. So that's the modalistic heresy. So again, that's why, as we'll see, I'll just dash all your hopes and dreams, take away your illustrations of the Trinity, which aren't illustrations of the Trinity. They're usually illustrations of heresy. And that's why, when we get to that, the point is you can still use the illustrations, just don't say it's the Trinity, okay? Because it's not the Trinity. It's an illustration of maybe one part of the Trinity, one aspect of it, one property of it, but it's not an illustration of the Trinity in its entirety. So that's why I say, keep using the water illustration, just don't say it's the Trinity, okay? Use it as an example of a modal distinction. So it's proper to do it that way. So that's the modal distinction, which is, again, as you can see, how can three be one? Well, here's how three can be one. Okay. Now, when you get to the modal distinction, I would make the case, since the soul or spirit is a single, non-composite, simple substance. Okay. So when we talk about divine simplicity, for example, that just means God's not a composite being. Simplicity means you can't make real or essential distinctions between the attributes, the persons, things like that. He's just not a composite being, and there are good reasons to hold that. So what does that mean? We've got to distinguish the attributes differently, okay, than real or essential distinction. But even in your soul spirit, so you can make a case as a simple substance, not subject to real or essential distinction, that, see, it's your entire soul that has a capacity for thought, or that is your intellect. It's your entire soul that has a capacity for will and emotions and so forth. But see, you can't do that with physical things, but with non-physical simple substances, the entire thing can be in one or the other modes simultaneously as a capacity. And you might even say you have these three capacities in entirety in your soul, but yet there is a progressive order of operation. The intellect comes before the will, it comes before emotions, just like there's an order of working in the Trinity. So the idea of these capacities going on, and by the way, I think that's going to be the best illustration you're going to get of three in oneness. And again, even that isn't the Trinity. That's just an example of how a single substance can be in three modes simultaneously. But a mode of existing of a power of intellect is not the same as being a person in and of itself. So that's why you have to distinguish that. So, sorry, I'm going to take my beverage here. Say that again. Well, the problem is with any physical analogy, see, the sun doesn't have a third of the divine essence. That's the problem, And anytime you use any physical analogy that has a part to it, well, okay, you could do this or whatever, but see, the Father has the entire divine substance. He's not a third of it. Okay, he's not a third omnipotent or a third infinite. So all of those, the point is conceptually, you either have to divide the substance or confound the persons at some point if you're doing that. So that's why. It's true. There might be three atoms in there or three, whatever you happen to have, but you still have to. You could divide the substance into quantities each, where not each part doesn't have the whole. So it's not really individually, in that case of a physical example, it's not a property that extends to every aspect of the thing. You simply, it's this, you have three physical things that are stuck together, each with its own distinct quantity of substance. So. Well, it's true, but the whole point is it's physical, and the whole point is that sonship. See, you're comparing that to the threeness of the Trinity. The Son has the entire divine essence. See, to be analogous, each hydrogen atom would have to be the entire quantity of the substance, and it's not. It's only a part of it. So that's where it breaks down. It's literally you have to divide the substance into different quantities of substance. Not one doesn't have the entirety of the substance. So that's the problem where it breaks down. So you can always show some sense of three in one, but three Stooges in one episode, stuff like that. You can always find something that's three in one. That's what people have been doing for 2,000 years, trying to illustrate the Trinity. But you're not going to find, with the exception of arguably the three faculties of the soul, where their entire substance, I rebuke thee. All right, it's funny everybody else did. Huh? Okay, so it's okay, I'll see you after class. So anyway, that's where, like I said, all the analogies are going to break down at some point, either dividing the substance, confounding the persons, being progressive or something, where the closest you're going to get for something that actually exists, as opposed to making up, three-headed unicorn souls or something, would be a soul that is simultaneously intellect, will, and emotions. You got to go to a non-physical thing to even begin to find the same category of thing, even though it's not, same type and not the same kind. So that's, that's where it would break down. But again, thing is, you can use those things, but use it with lots of clarification so people don't walk away conceptually dividing the essence, or you don't want to think that the Son is only a third of God. Okay, he is God. He's got the entire divine substance, or he's not God. You can't be a third omnipotent and be God. So that's all right.
How about a set of functions within the soul?
Functions are grounded in capacities of the substance itself. So, but see, that would go right back to the the analogy of, for example, the function of thinking is grounded in the capacity or power of intellect. So you can have the entire, and there when we get to Trinitarianism, so hold off on that. We're going to talk about the Intra-Trinitarian Relations, which are operations or relations within the Godhead, but the operations or relations are related to the three modes of existing. So they're interchangeable in that sense, where God is three modes of existing, but the three modes of existing result in the three inter-Trinitarian relations between the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. So the point is that you have to be a substance to have causal powers. You have to exist. The substance has to have the capacity for that particular causal power. And then there's the difference between the causal power itself and the operation of that capacity. Like we distinguish intellect as the capacity and thinking as the operation of it. So that's how you do that. So you're along the good lines there in your thinking. The whole point is a person is not merely a function. So the whole point is this, before we can get ahead of ourselves, there's a reason why there isn't a good illustration or analogy of the Trinity is because the Trinity is unique. There's nothing exactly like the Trinity. There's nothing exactly like a God-man. So you can't perfectly analogize to something that's unique. So, and that's why you're just not going to find a perfect illustration. And and that's why I say, things you brought, can you think of function or this? Yeah, illustrate the parts, but don't say it's the Trinity, okay? Then you have to build on that and say, yeah, but here's where it differs. Now, this kind of thing can exist, but the intellect now would be the person of the Son, or so forth, who has the capacity of relating to the Father, okay, conceptually. And so you have to build on that.
What was your thoughts on...
Well, you didn't hear the voice, so I can't talk to you. So, all right, go ahead.
What's your thoughts on the analogy Dr. Craig uses of Kerberos?
Hold that till we get to the Trinity.
Okay.
Because, like I said, for that, I'll just say, I don't like analogizing to fiction. God is like this thing that doesn't exist, okay? Again, if you feel comfortable with it, go ahead, but I've never been comfortable analogizing to the most true thing to something that doesn't exist. And again, but if you think that helps, in your own, like any of these, if you think it helps and you're not going to teach something that's false about God in the process, use it with lots of clarification. That's where you go with any of this stuff. So now the last couple of distinctions here, look at page 2 of the handout. Distinction by reason of analysis and distinction by reasoning, okay? And here, as we're going to kick into looking at divine essence and attributes and look at this ratiocinative distinction or distinction by reason of analysis, very close to formal distinction on the part of a thing. But here, it's very important because when we conceive of the oneness of God versus the attributes of God, we have to be very careful that we don't do two things, okay? That's why people have thought about, well, here's what we don't want to do. We can't make God a composite being. God is not made of a bunch of independent parts. Okay? Because, there's lots of arguments why, but the argument from divine, one attribute of God is independence. So, if God is independent, dependent on no one for his existence or his attributes or essence, then, and God's made of parts, then who put the parts together? Okay? So again, there's multiple lines along that. If you've got parts, you've got potentiality, you've got limitation, you've got a number of things going on. Are all the parts infinite? So we really have 30 infinites. So if infinity, which it is considered an incommunicable property of God, we've got 30 gods at that point. If we've got 30, huh? It's okay they evolved, okay. So yeah, they had good mamas, right? So they evolved them into little gods. So again, you can see conceptually here, you're just chipping away. It's not monotheism anymore. It's not monotheism anymore. You got these problems with the very concept of a self-existing monotheistic God. So we can't make God made of parts, okay? And on the other end, you can't say that there is no distinction. So in other words, And there are some that overstate the case or don't properly distinguish and say something like, well, there's no distinction in God. Oh, that's true. So what you're saying is that benevolence is the same as mercy, which is the same as omnipotence, which is the same as justice, right? Right. So what does that mean? If everything means the same thing, it means nothing. Okay? Which means what? It means all of our language about God is meaningless, and we don't know God. We have no knowledge of God. So if you go the other route, we don't have any knowledge of God, but clearly we do. So this is why you have to, like a lot of the things we do theologically, you start with the clear cases. It's clearly not that, and it's clearly not that. So it's going to be something in between, and that's usually where, we'll spend the rest of our lives, until the rapture, right? Debating which one is the correct way to understand it. Everybody gets to heaven, found out I was right about everything, and no, really. Okay, so, all right, so, but you, either way, so now here's the playing ground here, for Bible believers and to stay within orthodoxy. And while some people would use a formal distinction to distinguish the attributes, I think a more precise distinction is this distinction by reason of analysis, which says, in effect, it's a rational intramental distinction that has its basis or foundation in an external thing. It's not merely intramental, meaning, see, a distinction by reasoning is a pure intramental distinction not grounded in an extra-mental reality or the mind-independent world. And again, example of that, clear case of that, distinction between a unicorn and a Pegasus, okay? Now, you can conceive of all sorts of things that don't exist in the real world. Now, unless there's a supreme magical unicorn, but not average unicorns that exist. So you can conceive of them in your mind, but they don't have, a substantial existence in the real world. So, but even though, so that's the difference. You're not grounding your distinction between a unicorn and a Pegasus in a mind-independent world. Okay, so in this case, what do we have? This is related, the concept of a virtual distinction. So think of it this way. So we have the triune God, and then we have us, okay, perceiving God. By the way, map not to scale here, okay? I just wanted to, just wanted to be sure, So as you conceive of this, the point is that, look, we can observe things about God. There's a genuine extra mental reality. This isn't just something, omnipotence, omnipresence, divine joy, all of that. They're not just things I'm making up. I'm grounding it in what God is really displaying, his effects, what he produces, what I can observe. And that's why the idea of what's called a virtual distinction. The Latin virtus means power or effect. So I can distinguish powers, effects, and everything, and I can make a proper intramental distinction between benevolence, mercy, omnipotence, and all these things without dividing this into parts. I can just make proper conceptions or statements about this simple infinite substance. So that's the distinction by reason of analysis. Okay, which again, application here, you're dealing with any anti-Trinitarian that doesn't like 3 in 1, just bring them to, like 30 in 1 and show them, formal or more particularly, ratiocinative distinction and work them through that and explain the problem of compositeness in this. I've done this with JWs, and they're just literally going, oh, I never thought of that. Oh, I never thought of that. And, anybody else that ends up being an anti-Trinitarian. And all of a sudden, they just sort of, their objections to Trinitarianism just mostly melt away at that point. So, I mean, they're still going to retain some, but they're not as, sorry. Let's see here. Man, okay. Got to get to 4 o'clock. Okay, good. So, all right. Moving forward. So that's where this, besides the fact that hopefully you master this stuff, just understanding God is more clear for you. It's just, God is still a mystery, and I want to be clear on this. Mystery means something that has not yet been revealed. God is incomprehensible. We don't know everything about God, okay? That's why we never want to say we call it a circumscriptive knowledge of God. We know everything now. Here's knowledge of God. We got it all, okay? We don't. Mystery, but though, doesn't mean hard to understand. It means not yet revealed, okay? So, for example, 1 Corinthians 15, Paul says, "Behold, I tell you a mystery. We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed." So, now in the context, that was easy to understand. Sleep is the Christian euphemism for death, okay? Why? Because from the appearance of the body, it looks like you're asleep. In fact, that's why, anybody ever go by a cemetery? Yeah, that comes from the Greek koimaomai, which means to sleep, the noun form of it. In fact, the very names that we have, cemetery, is basically Judeo-Christian in origin. It indicates resurrection. It's a place of sleeping, okay, as opposed to these other things. So it assumes resurrection is coming. So now again, that assumes people actually thought about this. Now nowadays, people have no idea what cemetery means. It's the place where you bury the body. You get out Siri on iTunes. Where do I bury the body? There are a number of cemeteries around here, right? That's the I have fun with Siri every once in a while. So she comes up with some good insults too, coming back on those things. So, but on that, anyway. Point is, in context, mystery doesn't mean hard to understand. And in the context, that wasn't hard to understand. But some people will never die, and some people will just be changed when Christ comes back. Now, for that verse, 1 Corinthians 15, 51, so forth, if you have for your nursery in the church, just paint that on the wall. We should not all sleep, but we shall all be changed. It's for your babies. It's completely out of context, but it works in your nursery. So, okay. So, I know. I deserve that. No, okay. So now, moving on. Now you have, while there are more ways to distinguish, there's 5 basic ways, okay? And you really master these, all of a sudden things become clearer in how they relate and what they are and all that. So anyway, so that's the first half, how to make distinctions. Second half, now you get into substance language, person language. So now we have to come up with language. Again, so now we sort of know how to explain attributes. Well, now when we're trying to explain the three-in-oneness of God or all sorts of things, how is Christ one person with 2 natures? So now we get into the metaphysical language. What does all that mean? Okay. So let's look at this. Because we've got oneness language about God, and those are our terms, essence, substance, and really, I'll just put nature here. Nature is the most generic. Something's nature is really everything that makes that thing. But like human nature is everything that makes us human. But at the same time, there are 2 distinct substances that constitute human nature. There's a physical one and a non-physical one, even though both constitute human nature. So this is our oneness language. There's only one God, okay? But then we need to conceive of the persons, okay? The Father is not the Son is not the Spirit, and so forth. So that's why we move to the idea of a subsistent or a mode of subsistence, okay? And again, we'll unpack this as we go along. But so let's work through this now. and start with essence. Sorry, let me get one more lozenge here. Okay. No, did you? Okay, essence. So, I talked about that with respect to essential Christian doctrine. And remember, essence is the whatness of a thing. It's, again, you think about what gives a thing its identity, defined as what? The properties or qualities that make a thing precisely what it is and not something else, okay? That's a thing's essence. So all of you are human because you have a human essence, okay? It's a category, it's a genus, it's a specific set of properties or attributes that make you that kind of thing and not something else, okay? Yeah.
Could you just clarify what a genus is? I'm not sure.
Sorry. And taxonomy, it's a class, kingdom, phylus, genus, species, all of that. How do you sort things? And, this is that kind of thing and not another. Okay? So a genus is just literally, it's a category of thing. Okay? If you think about the task of sorting things, if I said, someone had the task, all right, go into that room and sort the humans from the furniture. Okay? Now, immediately, what would you need to accomplish that task? You need to know what the properties of a human are, and then I look around and say, human, 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 okay. No, okay, furniture, So, point is, that has a different set of properties or qualities from humans. So, the genus, furniture, it's going to have, certain things we can say about it, conceptualize about it, so forth. That's a different category of thing. And then, so does that help a little bit?
So how does that relate to essence then? The genus and essence?
Because an essence is everything. Okay, your essence is everything that makes you what you are. Those properties or characteristics that define, say, what a human being is. So human being is a category of thing. So they're related in the sense that you're not in the genus human being unless you have the properties or characteristics that define what a human being is.
So the properties and characteristics are the
Yeah,
essence.
yeah,
the genus is
exactly.
the
But they're a specific set that's definable for a certain kind of thing. See, humans are not apes. Apes are not dogs. Dogs are not, grilled cheese sandwiches and everything like that. So, point is, each thing will have properties that define it for being that kind of thing. So, genus, you could put the type of thing, the kind of thing that it is. The whole point, there's all sorts of categorical language that we use. But to sort something into a category, it has to have the properties of that category. You wouldn't be a Homo sapiens unless you had the essence of being a Homo sapiens.
So essence comes first, pretty much.
Well, I wouldn't even say first. The whole point is they're just related concepts. Okay, a thing is what it is and not something else. You are a human being. Why do we even use the term human being as a label or a genus? Because you have these kinds of properties or qualities. That's why we don't call you a dog, hog, frog, log, or whatever else, might be out there as a type of thing.
So is essence
So-
and substance the same thing?
Nope, that's where we're moving now. So thanks, segue. So this defines this. Now again, I've told you this when we did yesterday, and we did Essential Christian Doctrine. I like Aristotelian metaphysics. They make the most sense to me. You took everybody here, people you'll read, not everybody uses terms like essence and substance, exactly the same way. So that's why anytime you come across it in a book, it'd be nice if they define it before they use it. So that's why I'm telling you, for me, I like to think conceptually first. Okay, now this essence is this, okay? Now how do I distinguish that? For example, I can distinguish something that exists in the mind as a category from something that exists in reality. Okay, so what's a substance now? We'd say it is essence plus existence. It's an existing essence. Okay, so, and I gave you the illustration yesterday. Here, recipe for cherry pie, actual cherry pie. Okay, you can have the idea of it. You can enumerate the properties or qualities that make a cherry pie, but it's just that. It's an essence without existence you can't eat. So it's like a wish sandwich, right, from Elwood Blues, you know. So,
Does the substance have to be physical then?
nope. Nope, just means, no, in fact, no, well, Richard Dawkins would say that, but no, it just means existing essence. Remember, there's three kinds of substances. Again, infinite non-physical, limited non-physical, and limited physical. So again, what's a substance? It exists, it has properties, it has causal powers. And the point is, to have causal powers, you have to exist and be a substance. Whether, we'll talk about agent causation later on, or instrumental causation, or something to that effect. But even if you're, say, for a baseball bat to hit a baseball, point is there's instrumental causal powers that can change a state of affairs, but you can't cause an effect, you can't produce an effect unless you're a cause, but you can't have causal powers unless you exist and you're a substance. So that's just 101, metaphysics. So on that, hold on a second. So here, the idea of existing essence, some people, there's different language that comes on this. And where are you going, man? Oh, so go ahead. Oh. All right. I know. So, I know. It's afternoon, you had lunch. Some of you are already going, oh, I see you. So, all right, most of you is being kind. So, all right. So here, literally, you're going to hear people talk about this stuff differently. Like, well, what's on a substance? What does it really mean? Well, to substand, to stand below. It's a foundation for accidents or something. Accidental attributes are things non-necessary to a particular thing. Like, humans and hair. You shave someone's head, they're still human. Hair is accidental to human nature, the human essence. You can have it or not have it. I'm not looking at anyone, man. Don't, but just yeah. Some people might talk about the existence part as people talk about a bare particular, okay, or something like that. Something that on which all the other attributes hang. Well, I just call that existence. I'm not, that's a property of, what is that does a bare particular have its own causal power, as a property, or, a specific function? The whole point is you're going to read lots of stuff, in philosophy of religion and things like this, and you'll hear language like that. But for me, as I sort of work through this stuff over the last, couple of decades, I tried to minimize. Look, to me, it makes sense to distinguish, a recipe from the actual thing that exists. All right, the idea of it in the list to the actual instantiation of those particular properties. Okay, so that's why when we think of this conceptually, that's where I'm going with that. So, all right, now, so substance is existing essence. Now, I'm going to give you a distinction here that will also, I think, help you in further understanding. So it's going to move us to understanding persons. How many kinds of substances exist? Now, I gave you the three categories with respect to type, but there's also another basic division: rational substances and non-rational substances. Okay? So everything that exists divides into those two categories. Right? So what's a rational substance? Anything that has intellect, will, and emotions would be a rational type of substance. Okay? And anything that wouldn't have intellect, will, and emotions, is a non-rational substance. So as you consider this, see, now what we're really thinking is how do you distinguish persons from non-persons? Okay. Because our technical language, there's a number of ways to state it, but we think about full persons, we have three basic kinds: divine, angelic, and human. Okay? There's your three basic kinds of rational substances. Now, this doesn't address, hey, what do you do with, Coco the gorilla, Flipper, or Lassie. Cats are on this side.
What about
But
Deep Blue?
huh?
What about Deep Blue or
Deep Blue?
C-3PO or Data from Star Trek?
Yeah. I don't know, man. Okay, no. So we're talking reality here, not that whole.
Well, I
so
wonder because Deep Blue is the computer, the chess playing computer, and
Yeah.
a lot of atheists are using that and saying that it's rational.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and again, you could go there, but eventually, see, persons, we're going to see, especially this kind, are basically self-moving. They're not powered by something else. You don't have to put a battery in a human or a dog or, stuff like that. So at some point, having a computer which is actually programmed by a person to follow a contingency code or whatever isn't the same as a self-moving, self-thinking thing. It's just, it wouldn't do anything if it didn't have a battery in it and we're programmed to do so. So, so that's where it breaks down. But here, that's why, not getting into this, the point is, you go here, the point is these are the kind of persons that have the capacities for morality, aesthetics, abstract thought or second order thought. There's a number of ways we distinguish, we think of morally responsible people, from non-morally responsible people. Just for a moment to get here, like, yeah. All of this, the point is look, God's not going to have a judgment seat for Coco the gorilla, Flipper, or Lassie, okay? If a dog steals another dog's bone, they don't have doggy court, okay? So, and fortunately, you watch The Lion King, but they don't really have court with the hyenas and all the other, stuff like that. So that's fiction, by the way, So the point is, look, that is an issue. Personally, because I think a person, is the way our language works, is an individual instance of a rational substance, okay? A thinking substance, so, as opposed to something that doesn't have the capacity for that. So, and again, you'd have to further clarify and refine that to take out, highly programmed computers and all of that. But point is that particular instance or individual instance of a rational substance, I mean, that's really, that's what we think about, that's a subsistent, okay? A particular instance of a thing, but a person is a particular instance of a rational substance, which means angel, human, or whatever, an individual angel, an individual human they all have their own intellect, will, and emotions, okay? So in that case, but when we look at, biblically speaking, look at a person, what's the ground of your personhood? Well, it's in your soul or spirit. It's not the body. Corpses don't do any thinking, you might know. And God has never had a brain, but he's the smartest being there ever will be. So that's why, the idea of, we're reducible to brain states or something like that, just all of that, it's just some of those basic questions for all the atheist physicalists. Really, where's memory? That should be the easiest thing to detect because that's something that's growing all the time. You're learning new stuff all the time. Every perception you have, So where's the equivalent on your brain, or whether it's in your left toe or wherever it is, where the zeros and ones are stored that you can access and you can put together these propositions and images from the stored data in memory. And the answer is it's nowhere, because you don't have your body changing moment by moment, storing the information. But things like that are just, the physicalist will never have a full conception of human nature or being able to account for all the properties of it without a real soul. So, but this kind of stuff, all right, particular instance of a rational substance. Now, here's something that'll help you out a little bit. When you think about the person of Christ, and you think about what a person is generally, say, souls, spirits, whatever, are always active. Okay, according to the Bible, God's always active. He's alive. Our souls are immortal. Okay, in the sense that absent from the body, home with the Lord. We're shown, Luke 16:19-31, the rich man and Lazarus are having a conversation after death. The souls are, Revelation 6:9, the souls are slain on the altar of God. They're crying out, "How long, O Lord, for you avenge us?" 1 Samuel 28, Samuel saying, "Hey, how come you disturbed me?" He's still thinking, aware, all of that. So now there's text after text after text. It says we continue to be alive. Our spirits are active. And we think, we choose, we do all of that in the afterlife. So the whole point is now, think about personhood as an individual instance of a rational essence. You've got two basic functions. And so you've got now intellect, will, and emotions, but let's just take the first of the operative capacities or faculties, the intellect. Intellect has two basic movements. The first is reflexive. And remember to distinguish between the power or capacity from the operation of that power or capacity. Okay? Remember, your will is the capacity, your choice is the operation of the will. Okay? You couldn't choose unless you have the capacity to choose. Jello can't choose anything. Okay? And if you think it does, see me after class, and we'll take care of your little problem. So the first operation of the intellect is reflexive, means it bends back on the subject. Now, how do you know that? Because you are self-aware. You are an ego. It's first-person introspective awareness. Why? Because the first natural operation of the intellect is to bend back on the thinking subject and be aware of the thinking subject. So that's why you're not the person next to you, and so forth. So it's just not a problem. So what's the second modes or types of operations? That would be, let's see here, see if this one's rescued enough to use. The next would be to deliberate conceptually about objects, other subjects, truths, what's good, true, beautiful, all of that. But the first one is this, the second one is this. You can think about whether to go to Wendy's for lunch, you can think about, who to marry, you can think about, all of that. So the point is you've got this going on, and those are just natural operations that are going on constantly in the human soul. So,
What'd you say the second one was?
well, it's a progressive forward operation of the intellect that conceives of, again, everything, subjects, objects, propositions, images, and evaluates, in effect, their reasonableness, their truth claim, their beauty, whatever it happens to be. But the first operation, again, it's intuitive. You're self-aware, okay? All of you recognize yourself first as an I, not a we or a he or an it or, something second or third person. You have a first-person introspective awareness. Every human person has this. How do you explain that? Well, the only way to explain it is to say that you've got to have a capacity for having first-person introspective awareness, and then there's got to be the actual operation of first-person introspective awareness, okay? You're self-aware, okay? So that's what that would mean. So now you've got a thinking substance, okay, a person, okay, which for angels and humans, or even, Coco the gorilla, Flipper, whatever it happens to be. The difference, by the way, if you want to, normally I'd flesh this out a little bit more in some of the other lectures, but think of it this way. When you think about the difference between our personhood, and some people absolutely will not use the term person for anything less than a human or angel. I don't mind using it with lots of qualification. Well, they're non-morally responsible people. They're not, all that. But if you don't like that kind of equivocation, well, but we use divine person, angelic person, human person, non-morally responsible person. So in that case, all that said, if you want to conceive even how to think about the difference between a dog intellect and a human intellect, think of it this way. I don't think dogs have immortal souls any more than I think flies have immortal souls. They'll all the flies will be in hell, right? And along with disco, cats, and everything else that'll be there. So here's, human intellect, dog intellect. Here's the point. We measure that in the sense of subcapacities that intellect would have to recognize and reflect on and deliberate about. For example, first capacity, I think a dog can be self-aware as a human can be self-aware. The dog knows he's not his dog food bowl or the cat he's chasing. Again, and I just don't think there's any danger in conflating categories and saying a dog knows he's not his own dog food bowl. But some people I think some people are so protective of this that sometimes we just don't want to, we don't want to give X because we think it necessarily leads to Y. We have these necessary slippery slopes. People, how many angels can dance on the head of a pin? None at Biola. We have a no dancing rule. So that's the, which had nothing to do with the thing here, but you get the idea. So anyway, the point is at some point, they're going to be, thank you. They're going to be parallels here. Self-awareness, capacity to recognize your own physicality. Dog knows when he's hungry. We know when we're hungry. So eventually we can sort of list parallels between us and the capacities of a dog, but eventually these would run out, and then we'd have aesthetics, beauty. We have a capacity for aesthetics that dogs, an elephant can grab a brush and imitate something they see, but they don't have true aesthetic or creative aesthetic ability. You might note beavers build dams, but I've never seen a beaver's dam with bay windows and French doors on it, okay? Except in the Chronicles of Narnia, but that's a different thing. So that's fiction. So what? Depends how you're defining that. Yeah, that's right. I'd also put that. I think second order thoughts, metacognition go here. I think abstractions, moral thoughts. There's going to be at least 3 or 4 things that define us as being in the image of God that we have that the lower creatures don't have. See, dogs are clearly, they can think about, what do dogs think? If you could put the translator up there, bacon, 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 right? Now humans can think that too, but then we can say, but should I eat the bacon? Should I eat the whole package of bacon? I don't know. That's the, yeah.
How does that relate to children, though? Do they get some, like, say, a 1-year-old or somebody with profound disabilities?
Okay.
Have an appreciation for aesthetics?
Good question. They've got all this. The point is to develop the capacity, to act on the capacity. Say that's why, and also too, you got to remember a lot of this, we have to be very careful because there is a very important psychosomatic union between body and soul. And we're not just, a ghost in the machine. If you watch Pinky and the Brain, right? He's sitting there in the body, operating the body. It's not literally just a little dude, pushing buttons in the body. There's a natural union between soul and body. The physical world, we take stuff into our soul through the physical world, and our soul goes outward to the physical world through our body, and there's this close interaction with it. If there's any kind of damage in the brain and that function, That doesn't mean there's a damage in the capacities here, but it simply means you're not going to be able to display those, to use those in the physical world, develop them based on a posteriori knowledge coming in, all sorts of things. Same thing with, that was a big mistake prior to neonatal care, prenatal care. See, I mean, the thing is that, well, when's the baby alive? Well, when mom feels the kick. Well, that confuses epistemology and metaphysics. The baby was alive and existed long before that, as opposed to notice or knowledge of the baby being alive. So again, but that's where, look, we have good reasons to believe that souls are active from the moment of existence, and they continue to be. And they don't add or gain properties. This is just based on classic, theology from thousands of years and good philosophy of the soul. So biology, medical biology, doesn't change theology or philosophy of the soul or anything else. It just, all they can deal with is biology. They can't deal with the soul. So, and that's why you want to clearly have this stuff in mind. But those are questions people raise. What about, these kind of people? And the answer is they're full human persons that we need to take care of because they're made in the image of God and highly valuable. Because why? Because we have an essentialist view of personhood, not a functionalist view of personhood. We need to make sure that we look at what their essence is, not what they can do at any given moment, because as soon as you slide into a functionalist view of personhood, God help you if you go to sleep, because then you're not a full person anymore, because you're not, quote, fully functioning as other persons, and now you're a lesser type of person. So you have to be really, again, there's all these people who try and invent these new ideas. They just don't work out too well in the end.
What did you say on the continuum was right after self-awareness? I didn't catch that.
I'm moving to that. So, and then, the whole point is that, look, here's operation 1. Operation 2, here was number of 1, 2. Point is, you're self-aware before you're aware of any object, deliberation, or anything else. So you can say there's at least those two things going on. Yeah, real quick.
Quick question. Does a dog even possess the same kind of self-awareness as we do?
No, they wouldn't have the same kind.
You can't think, I am hungry, could he?
I don't know. I don't speak dog. But, so I don't. The point is, who knows? The point is they have some minimalist kind of self-awareness because they know they're not the cat they're chasing, and other things that they do with other dogs, chasing, sniffing, whatever, we'll leave it at that. They know that they are not the object and they can deliberate about it. They can, all of that. So they don't, but just like God has a greater sense of self-awareness than we do. The whole point is there's layers, these kinds of capacities. Just like, they can think, but, can they have second order thought? Okay, probably not. There didn't seem to be any good reason, or that a dog understands justice versus an injustice. Does one dog, one dog gets more food than the other, does the other one protest the injustice of it all? No, it just nudges the other dog out of the way and tries to eat their food. Okay, so, the thing is that, cats just sit there and say, feed me. So, we know how it goes with cats. So either way, point is, look, the whole point is that this would be a 3-hour lecture just to go on the capacities. Normally I would do that if I had more time. And we'd sort of work through that, because these are questions people are asking, but this is at least a framework for you to work through and begin to build on some of the issues. Now, I want to do this, and we'll take our afternoon break. So while some of you are going, I see. Okay, so all right, now, again, I meant Christological stuff. This is crucial to understand for Christology, because if you don't get this right, you're not going to get the incarnation right. Okay? Because again, all orthodoxy has said at Chalcedon, Christ is fully God and fully man. He has a real human rational soul, a real body, yet without sin. Okay? Yet, He's one person with two complete natures. Now, where does that come from? It comes from the Scriptures. Yeah, you read the Bible, and it says of Christ, the Word was God. Okay? He's the Creator. He's all these things. And yet the Word became flesh and dwelt amongst us. We know bodies are bodies, souls are souls. And so it says of Christ, he ate, he drank, he slept, he got tired, he was born of a woman. He had a real physical body. And at the same time, it says he grew in wisdom, that he prayed to God, that he was tempted in all things as we are, yet without sin. Well, God can't be tempted. God doesn't pray to God. God's omnisapient, so he doesn't grow in wisdom. So the ground of that is his human soul. He was amazed. He was surprised. You can't surprise an omniscient being. So that's why, again, this is not new stuff. The point is, this is why the church universally said he's got to be fully human. Not because the Scripture demands it, but also that he can't do the work of atonement without it. He can't die without spiritually without a soul, and actually take care of our penalty for sin. So how do we, and yet at the same time, the one person part of it is that John 17, his high priestly prayer, Father, glorify me together with the glory I had with you before the world was. He speaks in the first person and puts himself pre-incarnate, incarnate. He remains one person, pre-incarnate to incarnate. Now, in ECD 2, we're going to look at Christology, Christological heresies, and those kinds of things. But one is there is a view in all of them that bottom line is for the heresies is that they messed up on the there are always attempts to formulate a person of Christ, but they leave something out. Okay, and in those that deny deity, either Christ is he's a mere man, or in Arianism he's an angel who became a man. Okay, and then. But and I've got a chart of this I'm going to give you for ECD 2, but human soul, intellect, will, emotions, body. Christ is everything and we are, yet without sin, with respect to his human nature. So now the problem is, like with the Trinity, people who couldn't figure out three in oneness, well, we'd scrap something about the doctrine of the Trinity. So now we get to this, and we get to Christ. Well, I can't figure out how Christ is one person, so the Apollinarians and the Arians got rid of the rational part of their nature. Now, in Alexandria at that time, they were trichotomists, so they had spirit, was distinct from the soul, and so forth. If you're a dichotomist, you just say, look, they just got rid of this, and total. It's God and a bod, okay? But then how is God tempted? How does God die? How does God, pray to God? How does God, all the things that are functions and capacities of the soul, God can't do unless he's got a limited one. So now it's very simple to get to classic, explanation of the incarnation without resorting to Arianism, Apollinarianism, which all in some sense would reduce Christ somehow in his humanity. And it's simply this. Remember, we'll see this. Christ already exists as a person from all eternity. He's always the Son of God in the sense that he is aware constantly. The Son has a relation to the Father. He's aware of himself in relation to the other two, always. And the same with the Father and the Holy Spirit. So he's already a person. He's already self-aware in that sense. So he can't have a second sense of self-awareness. That would make him a we and not an I, okay? He'd say, and it would destroy the incarnation. There's no two senses of self-awareness. So what does Christ do? It says he grew in wisdom. So what does that mean? His intellect would certainly have that. And again, the key here is he's got the capacity. And you see this operation where he deliberates, he prays, he asks the Father, he asks all these things. So what's the one thing that's missing from Christ in the incarnation? One thing and one thing only. It's not a capacity, it's just this. There is no second reflexive operation here. That's it. Where a freestanding individual human would have that, well, Christ is already a person. He's already self-aware. So it's only this, it's not the capacity itself, the intellect, will, emotions, or anything else. It's simply, he doesn't need this to be self-aware. He's already self-aware. So now he's got a limited mode of deliberation and an unlimited mode of deliberation, and he's self-aware. So he's one person with two natures. Then real quick, then we go to break. Yeah.
Is that self-aware as a human, or is it self-aware?
Yeah. Hold on to that, because he's a single person with a single sense of self-awareness. We flesh this stuff out in Christology. That's what we call anhypostatic Christology. He knows in his humanness he's a person, but where does he get that self-awareness? It's in the personality of the Logos.
He brought it to his humanness.
Yeah, he has to. Otherwise, he'd be two persons. So the only thing, but see, you can't take away the capacity, because then he's not fully human. Okay? So all you have is not a capacity or a property, but a single operation for the unique status of a God-man who's the only one that has two rational natures. Okay? Quick question.
Is soul a kind of a substance different from the spirit, or is it interchangeable? Or is it...
Yeah, on that, good question. That's an anthropological question. That's why we're a little ahead of ourselves. See, now we're on Trinitarianism. Then we get to decree, creation, providence, then specific works of God. That's when we look in the doctrine of man, and that's where we'd actually define the human constitution, what's soul, spirit, body. And it comes down to it, either if you're a trichotomist, you think that soul, spirit, and body, that, you know, these are two distinct substances. If you're a trichotomist. If you're a dichotomist, you say, nope, they're one substance, and that soul and spirit are just words that distinguish different properties within the same substance. Okay? So in other words, a dichotomist says we've got two substances that constitute human nature. A trichotomist literally means to cut into three. There's three substances that constitute human nature. So the trichotomist makes a real or essential distinction between the soul and spirit, and the dichotomist makes a formal distinction between soul and spirit.
Does the Bible ever attribute soul to God or Jesus or
Yeah, when you say the word soul, suke, I can't think of any place where it attributes it to God or the divine nature itself. But the point is, suke, and I don't want to get too far ahead, so we have to take our breaks. Some of you are wiggling a little too much here. The point is that pneuma, it's what we translate spirit, really is indicating spiration or non-corporeality, whereas suke really indicates rationality, like psychology. Okay? So the point is, our soul, or if it's one thing, it's true, it's both non-physical and it's the ground of our rational faculties. So that's why, Jello doesn't have soul suke properties to it. But if you think it does, well, anyway, we'll do that. So that's why, to your question, it really has to do with, once you've gone through anthropology and you know what those things are. See, to talk about whether Christ is fully God, what do we have to have in place? This stuff. To talk about whether he's fully human, you have to have your anthropology in place. So Christology puts those two together and say, but now how do we understand him as a God-man? Okay? But you have to have all those two prior categories in place to even conceive the question and approach it. All right, let's take a quick break, 5 to 10 minutes.